Hashtag when humanity's warship entered the war zone. The entire galaxy froze. The Galactic Council's emergency session had been called for the 20th time this cycle. But this time was different. Ambassador Zethtar's tentacles trembled as they watched the holographic display showing the edge of the contested zone. For 300 years, the Krellian Empire and the Vorthak Confederacy had been locked in a brutal war over the resource-rich Nebula sector. Countless species had tried to intervene, to broker peace, but all had failed. The war zone had become a graveyard of ships and dreams. Another monitoring probe destroyed, reported the Altarian representative, their crystalline form pulsing with anxiety. That makes 72 this month alone. The Council Chamber, a massive spherical room floating in a neutral space station at the galaxy's center, buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from over 1,000 civilizations had gathered, their forms as diverse as the stars themselves. Some were gaseous beings contained in environmental suits. Others were silicon-based life forms that clicked and hummed, and still others defied conventional description entirely. Zethtar had served as council mediator for 50 cycles, and in all that time, they had never seen such widespread fear. The Krellian-Vorthak war had escalated beyond anyone's worst predictions. Both sides now fielded planet killer weapons, and their latest clash had resulted in the complete annihilation of 3 inhabited systems caught in the crossfire. "We must do something," insisted the Zealothi delegate, their bioluminescent skin flashing urgent patterns. If this continues, the gravitational disruptions alone could destabilize half the galaxy. But what could they do? The Krellians were a warrior race, bred for battle over millennia. Their ships were living weapons, grown in vast bioforges and capable of adapting to any threat. The Vorthak, on the other hand, had achieved a level of technological advancement that bordered on the mystical. Their vessels could phase between dimensions, striking from angles that shouldn't exist. "Perhaps," suggested a timid voice from the back, "we could contact the humans." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant hum of the station's life support seemed to pause. The speaker was a young Quellian, barely old enough to attend council sessions. Their pale blue feathers ruffled nervously under the weight of 1,000 stares. "The humans?" Zethtar's voice carried a mixture of curiosity and concern. "They've only been spacefaring for what, 200 years? They barely qualify for council membership." "Yes, but," the Quellian continued, finding courage in their words, "they have something unique. Remember the Proxima incident?" "Ah, yes. The Proxima incident." Zethtar's memory cells fired, recalling the reports. A human colony had been attacked by pirates, a coalition of 3 different species known for their ruthlessness. The colony's single defense vessel, something the humans called a destroyer, had somehow held off all 3 pirate fleets for 7 days until reinforcements arrived. When investigators later examined the wreckage, they found that the human ship had continued fighting even after suffering damage that should have been catastrophic. The ship's AI had somehow kept weapons firing, shields partially functional, and life support running with less than 10% of its systems operational. "That was impressive," admitted the Crane ambassador, their mechanical voice carrying a hint of respect. "But we're talking about the 2 most powerful military forces in the galaxy. The humans have, what, a few dozen warships?" 37, corrected the Terran observer. They had been silent until now, as observers weren't typically allowed to speak during emergency sessions. But, given the topic, an exception was made. The human appeared unremarkable compared to the exotic forms around them. Bipedal, no natural weapons, no psychic abilities. Just soft skin and a brain that seemed too large for combat. "Earth has 37 warships. But we've been working on something special." The representatives leaned in, intrigued despite themselves. Humans were known for being unpredictable. They formed pack bonds with non-sentient creatures, turned their homeworld's most dangerous predators into pets, and had a disturbing tendency to find humor in life-threatening situations. They also had an unnerving ability to survive things that should kill them, and a reputation for being stubborn to the point of insanity. "What kind of something?" Zethtar asked carefully. The human smiled, and several representatives unconsciously backed away. They had learned that when humans showed their teeth like that, it could mean many things: joy, aggression, or something the humans called dark humor that no other species quite understood. We call it the UES Persistence. It's different from our other ships. Before anyone could ask for clarification, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The holographic display automatically switched to long-range sensors, showing the war zone. The Krellian Armada, over 1,000 bioships strong, had just emerged from hyperspace on one side of the nebula sector. On the other side, the Vorthak fleet, 500 vessels of impossible geometry, phased into reality. By the void, someone whispered, "This is it. They're going for a final battle." The two fleets began moving toward each other, their weapons powering up. The energy readings were off the scale. When they clashed, the devastation would be unprecedented. Conservative estimates suggested the shockwave alone would render 17 systems uninhabitable. That's when they saw it. A single point of light appeared directly between the two advancing fleets. Space rippled around it like water disturbed by a stone. Then, with a flash that temporarily overloaded the station's sensors, a ship emerged. It was wrong. That was the first thought that crossed every mind in the council chamber. Where Krellian ships were organic, flowing things of chitin and flesh, and Vorthak vessels were crystalline mathematics given form, this ship was something else entirely. It was blocky, almost primitive in its design. A long, rectangular hull with protruding sensor arrays and weapon platforms seemingly welded on as afterthoughts. It looked like someone had taken a cargo hauler and decided to turn it into a warship with whatever they had lying around. But it was massive, easily 3 times the size of the largest dreadnought in either fleet. That's impossible, breathed the Altarian. The power requirements alone for a ship that size. The human observer's smile widened. We had to get creative with the power source. Turns out if you're slightly insane and don't mind violating a few laws of physics, you could do interesting things with artificial singularities. On the display, both fleets had stopped their advance. Thousands of ships, representing the peak of military might from 2 of the galaxy's superpowers, hung motionless in space. For the first time in 3 centuries, the guns of the Krellian Vorthak war fell silent. The human ship, the UES Persistence, broadcast a single message on all frequencies. The voice was calm, almost conversational, with that distinctive human quality that suggested they found the situation slightly amusing. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earthship Persistence. We're here to enforce a ceasefire. Any vessel that powers weapons or moves aggressively will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. You have 10 seconds to comply." The council chamber erupted. They can't be serious. 1 ship against 2 fleets. The humans have gone mad. But on the display, something extraordinary was happening. Neither fleet moved. Neither fleet fired. They simply waited, because every scanner, every sensor, every detection system both fleets possessed was screaming the same impossible message. The human ship's power signature wasn't just high, it was theoretically impossible. The vessel was outputting more energy than a small star, contained within a hull that shouldn't be able to exist without collapsing in on itself. "What did you do?" Zethtar asked the human observer, their voice barely above a whisper. The human shrugged. "We learned something from our history. When you're outnumbered, outgunned, and outclassed, you don't play by the enemy's rules. You change the game entirely." On the screen, the 10 seconds elapsed. Still, neither fleet moved. The UES Persistence hung between them like a referee at a sporting event, if sporting events involve enough firepower to sterilize solar systems. "Captain Chun," came a transmission from the Krellian flagship. "This is Warlord Greth. Your ship is impressive, but you cannot hope to stop both our fleets. Withdraw, and we will allow you to leave unharmed." "Counteroffer," Captain Chun replied cheerfully. "You all turn around, go home, and we can discuss your territorial disputes over coffee and donuts like civilized beings." "My treat." The Vorthak commander's response was less diplomatic. "Foolish human. Your single vessel, no matter how large, cannot stand against the might of—" They never finished the sentence. The UES Persistence did something that made every physicist in the galaxy question their sanity. It split apart, not exploded, not separated into sections. The massive ship literally divided into 12 identical copies of itself, each one maintaining the same impossible energy signature. They spread out, forming a perimeter around both fleets. Sorry, what was that about a single vessel? Captain Chen's voice carried that distinctive human trait of finding humor in the face of annihilation. We really need to work on our counting. Math was never humanity's strong suit. The council chamber had gone completely silent. Even breathing seemed to have stopped. On the display, neither fleet had moved. How could they? They were now surrounded by 12 impossible ships, each one radiating enough power to make their weapons' computers throw error messages. How was all Zethtar could manage? The human observer looked thoughtful. Well, you know how everyone says humans are crazy? Turns out, when you tell a human engineer something is impossible, they take it as a personal challenge. When you tell a human quantum physicist that you can't have the same object exist in multiple places simultaneously on a macro scale, they start doing very interesting things with dimensional mathematics. And when you tell human military strategists that they can't possibly stand against superior numbers, they gestured at the screen. They get creative. The standoff continued for long minutes. Then, slowly, the Krellian bioships began to turn away. One by one, they retreated from the battlefield. The Vorthak fleet held out longer, their pride warring with their survival instincts. But eventually, even they began to phase out, disappearing back into whatever dimension they called home. Within an hour, the war zone was empty except for 12 human ships that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, but definitely did exist. Captain Chen's final transmission was heard throughout the galaxy. Warzone is now under human protection. Any species wishing to discuss peace negotiations can contact Earth's diplomatic corps. We'll provide the coffee. You bring the pastries. Chen out. The 12 ships merged back into one. Another impossibility added to the growing list, and the UES Persistence vanished in a hyperspace, leaving behind a very confused galaxy and a war zone that for the first time in 300 years was silent. In the council chamber, Zethtar turned to the human observer. Your species just changed the balance of power in the entire galaxy. You realize that? The human nodded. We figured it was about time someone did. You've all been so focused on who had the biggest fleet, the most advanced technology, the longest military tradition. You forgot something important. What's that? Wars aren't won by the side with the most ships. They're won by the side that refuses to play by the rules everyone else assumes can't be broken. Humanity might be new to the galactic stage, but we've been breaking impossible rules since we first looked at the ocean and decided to build a boat. As the council session dissolved into chaos, with representatives demanding explanations, filing protests, and trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed, one thought echoed through every mind. The humans were no longer just another minor species trying to find their place in the galaxy. They were a force that could make the galaxy's two greatest military powers freeze in place with a single ship that defied the laws of physics. And if they could do that with one ship, what else might they be capable of? The galaxy would soon find out that when humans entered a conflict, they didn't just bring weapons and ships. They brought something far more dangerous. The absolute conviction that impossible was just another word for challenge accepted. And in the depths of space, heading back to Earth, Captain Sarah Chun poured herself another cup of coffee and smiled. The real beauty of the Persistence wasn't its impossible technology or its ability to exist in multiple places at once. It was the fact that it only needed to work once. Because sometimes the greatest weapon wasn't firepower or technology. It was making your enemy believe you had capabilities they couldn't comprehend. And humans, throughout their history, have become masters at turning belief into reality. The war zone remained empty. The killing had stopped. And across the galaxy, military strategists began the impossible task of trying to figure out how to fight an enemy that refused to acknowledge the rules of warfare everyone else took for granted. The humans had arrived on the galactic stage not with a whisper, but with a paradox. And nothing would ever be the same again. The aftermath of the Persistence incident, as historians would later call it, sent ripples through every corner of civilized space. In the gleaming halls of the Krellian Empire, Warlord Grech stood before the Circle of Blades, the highest military council of his people. His bioarmor, usually a vibrant display of health and power, had dulled to muddy browns and grays, a sign of deep distress among his kind. "You retreated," Elder Warrior Sketh accused, her 4 arms crossed in a gesture of disappointment. 3,000 years of Krellian military tradition, and you turned tail before a single alien ship. Grech's mandibles clicked in frustration. "Elder, with respect, you weren't there. That thing wasn't just a ship. Our bioscanners couldn't even process what they were detecting. The readings suggested it was simultaneously there and not there, existing in 12 dimensions at once while occupying physical space that our warriors' minds couldn't fully perceive." "Excuses," spat another council member. "The humans are primitives. They still use metal hulls and chemical propulsion in some of their vessels. They haven't even achieved proper genetic mastery of their own bodies. And yet," Grech said quietly, "they made us retreat without firing a single shot." The council chamber fell silent. In 3 millennia of recorded history, the Krellian Empire had never retreated from battle. They had lost, yes, but always while fighting to the last warrior. This bloodless withdrawal was unprecedented and deeply shameful. Meanwhile, in the crystal spires of the Vorthak Confederacy, a similar scene was playing out. Supreme Calculator 9th Degree Vex floated in a probability chamber, surrounded by swirling mathematical equations made manifest. The other calculators had assembled in their geometric perfection, each one a living computer capable of processing battle strategies at the speed of thought. "The probability matrices are clear," Vex stated, their voice a harmonic convergence of frequencies. What the humans displayed was mathematically impossible. No known physics allows for macroscopic quantum superposition on that scale. "Perhaps our calculations are flawed," suggested third-degree Kix. "The humans might have discovered new mathematics." "Impossible," several voices harmonized at once. "Mathematics is universal. It cannot be discovered differently." "Then explain what we witnessed," Vex challenged. 12 identical ships with identical energy signatures, each one outputting power levels that would require consuming a star. Our dimensional phase weapons, which have never failed to lock onto a target, couldn't even establish a probability lock. It was as if the ship existed in a state of perpetual uncertainty. On Earth, in a bunker buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Admiral Jennifer Martinez sat across from Captain Sarachun. The debriefing room was Spartan, gray walls, a simple table, and chairs that had seen better days. It was a far cry from the ornate council chambers of other species. "So," Martinez said, lighting a cigar despite regulations, "want to tell me how you got 2 of the galaxy's superpowers to blink?" Chun grinned, spinning her coffee cup between her hands. "Honestly, Admiral, we played the biggest bluff in human history, and it worked." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Bluff? The persistence is real, don't get me wrong. Dr. Petrov's team did manage to create a functioning quantum field manipulator. The ship can appear to be in multiple places at once. But," Chun paused, choosing her words carefully, "it's more like a very advanced holographic projection combined with sensor spoofing. We had 1 real ship and 11 very convincing illusions. The power readings? Artificial singularity is real. We're containing a micro black hole about the size of a pinhead. Gives off incredible energy readings, but most of it is wasted as Hawking radiation. We just figure out how to make it look scarier on sensors than it actually is." Martinez leaned back, smoke curling around her weathered face. "So if they had called our bluff, then humanity would have learned real quick whether 1 very powerful ship could take on 2,000. My money was on probably not, but the thing about humans is..." Chun shrugged. "We're really good at selling confidence. Every poker player knows you don't need the best hand if you can make everyone else fold." The Admiral studied her captain. Chun was young for such a command, barely 40, with premature gray streaking her black hair. But she had something that couldn't be taught at any academy, the ability to project absolute certainty even when flying by the seat of her pants. "The council wants to meet with us," Martinez said, flicking ash into a tray. "All 1,000+ species are suddenly very interested in humanity. We've gone from barely noticed newcomers to the species that stopped a 300-year war with one ship. Technically, 12 ships," Chen corrected with a smirk. "Don't get cute. The point is, we've got every military in the galaxy trying to figure out our technology. The Altarians are offering us 3 systems for the quantum field equations. The Zafrani want to establish a formal alliance. Even the Ethereals broke their 1,000-year silence to ask about our dimensional manipulation techniques." Chen's expression grew serious. "What are we telling them?" "Nothing for now. The President and the Security Council are in emergency sessions." "But Sarah," Martinez fixed her with a hard stare. "This can't last. Eventually, someone's going to call our bluff. We need to be ready." Back in the Galactic Council chambers, emergency sessions had become the norm. Representatives who hadn't spoken to each other in centuries were suddenly very chatty, all dancing around the same question. What else were the humans capable of? The Quellian who had first suggested contacting humanity found themselves the center of attention. Ambassador Tillix, their pale blue feathers constantly ruffled from stress, had been questioned by dozens of delegations. "You must understand," Tillix explained for the 100th time, "the humans I studied aren't a warrior race. They're complicated. They have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. They prefer diplomacy, trade, cultural exchange. But when threatened, they create impossible ships," finished the Crane ambassador. "We need to know more. Their history, their psychology, their limitations." "I can share what I know," Tillix offered. "But be warned, human history is disturbing. They fought hundreds of wars among themselves before achieving spaceflight. They created weapons that could destroy their own planet multiple times over while they still lived on it. They have a concept called mutually assured destruction that they use to prevent wars by ensuring everyone would die if anyone attacked." "Madness," someone muttered. "Or genius," countered another. "If the threat is severe enough, even the most aggressive species will hesitate." The Terran observer, who had remained silent through most of the discussions, finally spoke up. "If you want to understand humans, you need to understand something fundamental about us. We don't see impossibility the way you do. Every other species we've encountered has a point where they say, this cannot be done. Humans have a point where we say, this cannot be done with current methods. There's a very important difference. Elaborata, demanded Setar. The human stood, moving to the central hologram. Every species here achieves spaceflight by mastering 1 or 2 principles really well. The Krellians perfected biological engineering. The Vorthak mastered dimensional mathematics. The Altarians excel at energy manipulation. But humans? We're generalists. We're not the best at anything, but we're pretty good at everything. And, more importantly, we're willing to try combining things that shouldn't work together." They pulled up a display showing human history. "Nuclear weapons. We developed those while half our planet didn't even have electricity. Spaceflight. We strapped humans to barely controlled explosions and hope for the best. Artificial intelligence. We created minds that could think faster than us before we fully understood our own consciousness. Every step of our development has been a massive gamble that somehow paid off. And the persistence?" Zethtar asked. "The persistence is just the latest gamble. Take a bit of quantum mechanics, add some dimensional theory borrowed from studying Vorthak technology, power it with contained singularities that our physicists still argue about, and wrap it all in good old-fashioned human audacity. Should it work? Probably not. Does it work? Well, the human gestured at the still empty Warzone on the display. You tell me. In the following weeks, humanity found itself in an unprecedented position. Trade delegations arrived daily. Military alliances were offered. Scientific exchanges were proposed. Earth's diplomatic corps, which had been a relatively small operation, suddenly needed to triple in size. But perhaps the most significant change was in the Warzone itself. The space that had been a battlefield for 3 centuries began to transform. With neither the Krellians nor the Vorthak willing to risk another encounter with human technology, smaller species began to move in. Traders established routes through what had been no man's land. Mining operations started extracting resources from asteroid fields that had been too dangerous to approach. The UES Persistence made regular patrols, though it never again displayed its multiplication ability. It didn't need to. The threat was established. Like a bouncer at a bar who only needs to flex once to keep everyone in line. The mere presence of the human ship was enough. Captain Shin found herself in an odd position. Half the galaxy thought she commanded some sort of superweapon. The other half was convinced humanity had unlocked secrets of the universe that no one else had discovered. The truth, that she commanded a very powerful, but ultimately single ship crewed by humans who were making things up as they went along, was somehow more terrifying to her than any of the theories. "Captain," her communications officer called out during a routine patrol. "We're receiving a transmission. It's unusual." "Define unusual, Lieutenant." "It's from both the Krellian Empire and the Vorthak Confederacy. They're requesting a joint meeting." She nearly spilled her coffee. Joint? As in together? The two species that have been trying to exterminate each other for 3 centuries. "Yes, ma'am. They're proposing neutral ground. They want to discuss terms." Shin set down her cup carefully. "Terms for what?" "Peace talks, Captain. They want humanity to mediate." In her ready room, Chun stared at the message on her screen. This wasn't supposed to happen. The plan had been to stop the immediate fighting, buy humanity time to establish itself better in galactic politics. No one had expected the galaxy's 2 superpowers to actually consider peace. She opened a channel to Earth. Admiral Martinez appeared on the screen, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "I assume you've seen the request," Martinez said without preamble. "Admiral, we're not diplomats. We're barely holding together the illusion that we're some sort of technological gods. If they start asking detailed questions." "I know, but we can't refuse. The entire galaxy is watching. If humanity walks away from a chance to broker peace, we lose the credibility the Persistence bought us." Chun ran her hands through her hair. "So what do we do?" "What humans have always done," Martinez said with a tired smile. "We wing it and hope our reputation for insanity keeps everyone too off balance to notice we're making it up as we go." The peace talks were arranged for neutral ground, a station in dead space, equidistant from all major powers. The Persistence would provide security, which Shun found ironic. The ship that had started this whole situation by being impossible was now the guarantee that 2 ancient enemies would play nice. As the day approached, humanity's best diplomats prepared frantically. They studied 300 years of conflict, analyzed every failed peace attempt, and tried to understand cultures so alien that their thought processes barely made sense. But in the end, they fell back on humanity's secret weapon. Not technology, not military might, not even the reputation for insanity. "Coffee. You want to serve them stimulants?" the Secretary of State asked incredulously during a planning session. "It's not about the stimulants," explained the lead negotiator, Dr. James Wright. "It's about the ritual. Every human culture has some version of sharing food or drink as a peace gesture. We break bread, we share wine, we have tea ceremonies. It's fundamentally human, and that's what we need to be, fundamentally human. These species have tried everything else. Maybe what they need is to see a different way." The day of the talks arrived. The Krellian delegation, led by Warlord Grech himself, arrived in bioships that looked like living nightmares. The Vorthak delegation, with Supreme Calculator Vex at the helm, came in vessels that hurt to look at directly, their geometries existing in too many dimensions at once. And the humans? They arrived with coffee, donuts, and a conference table made of actual wood from Earth. The meeting room was a study in contrasts. The Krellians' biological enhancement suits dripped and pulsed. The Vorthak floated in perfect mathematical formation. And in the middle sat 3 humans in simple uniforms, pouring coffee from a pot like they were hosting a neighborhood meeting. "Before we begin," Dr. Wright said calmly, "I'd like to establish something. Humanity doesn't have 300 years of history in this conflict. We don't have ancestral grudges or traditional claims. What we have is a fresh perspective and really good coffee. So, let's start with a simple question. What do you actually want?" Grech's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Victory. The destruction of our enemies. The resources of the nebulous sector. Okay, but why? Right pressed. What does victory get you that peace wouldn't? The warlord seemed stumped by the question. In 300 years, no one had asked why they were fighting, only how to win. Vex's harmonic voice filled the room. The nebulous sector contains element 0 deposits crucial for our dimensional technology. And the Krellians need the biological compounds found in the nebula's unique ecosystem, Wright noted, consulting his files. So you're fighting over different resources entirely? You literally need different things? Both delegations fell silent. In 3 centuries of war, they had assumed they were fighting over the same prizes. Wright poured himself more coffee, the mundane gesture somehow commanding attention. On Earth, we have a saying, the first casualty of war is truth. You've been killing each other for so long, you forgot to ask if you even wanted the same things. The talks continued for hours. There were setbacks, moments where ancient hatred nearly boiled over. But each time, the humans did something unexpected. When tensions rose, they called for a break and introduced the aliens to donuts. When complex territorial disputes arose, they pulled out crayons and paper, actual crayons, and started drawing simple diagrams. This is how children negotiate on Earth, Chen explained to an incredulous Grech when he questioned the primitive tools. Sometimes, the simplest solutions are the best. No quantum equations, no bio-neural interfaces. Just being sitting around a table, drawing lines on paper, finding compromise. By the end of the first day, more progress had been made than in 3 centuries of conflict. Not because the humans had forced a solution, but because they had asked questions no one else had thought to ask. As the delegations retired to their ships, Chen found herself alone with Grech and Vex in the observation lounge. Stars wheeled slowly outside, indifferent to the drama below. I must know, Grech said suddenly. The persistence. How many more such ships does Earth possess? Chun smiled, that same smile that had unsettled the Galactic Council. Does it matter? What matters is that we were willing to use it. That we were willing to stand between 2 fleets, outnumbered 1,000 to 1, and say no more. But the technology, Vex insisted, the quantum superposition, that the dimensional folding, is irrelevant, Chun finished. Whether we have 1 ship or 1,000, whether our technology is real or illusion, the point remains the same. Humanity looked at an impossible situation and decided to try anyway. That's what makes us dangerous. Not our weapons, but our willingness to use them in ways no one expects. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. The galaxy spent so long focusing on who had the biggest fleet, the best technology. You forgot that wars aren't won by weapons. They're won by the people willing to stand up and say enough. The persistence isn't our greatest weapon. Our greatest weapon is the audacity to believe we could stop a war everyone else had given up on. As she left, Grech and Vex exchanged glances, a warrior bred for battle and a living calculator finding common ground in their confusion about these impossible humans. The peace talks would continue for weeks. There would be setbacks, arguments, moments where old hatred threatened to destroy everything. But slowly, impossibly, peace began to take shape. Not because the humans forced it, but because they showed 2 ancient enemies a different way to think. And through it all, the U.S. Persistence patrolled the former Warzone, a single ship that had changed the galaxy not through firepower, but through the uniquely human ability to bluff, to believe, and to make the impossible possible through sheer, stubborn refusal to accept that it couldn't be done. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. When humans entered a conflict, the rules changed. Not because they were stronger or more advanced, but because they simply didn't accept that the rules couldn't be rewritten. And in council chambers and military academies across 1,000 worlds, strategists began to realize that the most dangerous species in the galaxy might not be the ones with the biggest claws or the most advanced technology, but the ones who looked at impossible odds and said, hey, want to bet? 6 months after the peace talks began, the impossible had become routine. The former Warzone, now renamed the Unity Sector by some optimistic bureaucrat, buzzed with activity. Trading posts sprouted like mushrooms after rain. Mining vessels from a dozen species extracted resources that had been unreachable for centuries. And at the center of it all, the U.S. Persistence continued its patrols, a reminder that the peace was protected by something nobody quite understood. Captain Sarah Chun had developed a morning routine. Coffee at 0600, status reports at 0630, and at 0700, a call from someone somewhere in the galaxy trying to figure out humanity's secret. Today's call was from the Ethereals, beings of pure energy who hadn't shown interest in corporeal affairs for millennia. Captain Chun. The Ethereal's voice resonated directly in her mind, bypassing her ears entirely. We have analyzed your ship's energy patterns for 4,847 cycles. The mathematics suggest you are violating at least 17 fundamental laws of physics. Only 17? Chun sipped her coffee, grateful that the Ethereals couldn't see her grin. We were aiming for 20. Back to the drawing board, I guess. You jest, but this is a serious matter. If humanity has discovered new physics, it is your obligation to share it with the galactic community. And we will, Chun lied smoothly, just as soon as we understand it ourselves. You know how it is with accidental discoveries. Sometimes you build something that works before you understand why it works. The Ethereal's energy pattern fluctuated in what might have been frustration. That is not how science functions. It is if you're human. We invented flight before we fully understood aerodynamics. We used electricity before we understood electrons. Hell, we were throwing spears before we understood physics at all. Making it work comes first. Understanding comes later. After the call ended, Chin's first officer, Commander Alex Reeves, shook his head. How long do you think we can keep this up? As long as necessary, Chin replied. The longer everyone spends trying to figure out our secret technology, the more time we have to develop actual advantages. And humanity was developing advantages, just not the kind anyone expected. While the galaxy's greatest minds tried to decode the Persistence's impossible technology, human traders were establishing networks. Human diplomats were learning alien languages at unprecedented rates. Human scientists were absorbing centuries of galactic knowledge like sponges. And human military strategists were studying every species' tactics, looking for weaknesses that complacency had hidden. Dr. Lisa Park, Earth's leading xenopsychologist, had established an office on the Unity Station, the massive diplomatic hub that had grown around the peace talks. Her specialty was understanding how alien minds worked, and business was booming. The problem, she explained to Admiral Martinez during one of their weekly briefings, is that every species projects their own psychology onto others. The Krellians assume everyone thinks in terms of dominance and submission because they do. The Vorthak believe everyone processes reality through mathematical frameworks because that's their nature. Nobody steps back and tries to understand truly alien thinking. Except humans. You know why? Because we can't even understand ourselves half the time. We're used to dealing with irrationality, contradiction, and paradox. We have a dozen different cultures on one planet that see reality differently. That's our real advantage. We're pre-adapted to chaos. Her point was proven daily. When the Zealoty presented a trade agreement in the form of a complex light pattern that had to be viewed from 17 angles simultaneously, human negotiators just shrugged and brought in an artist who specialized in holographic sculptures. When the Quellians insisted on conducting diplomacy through interpretive dance, humans sent a ballet troupe. When the hive mind collective wanted to negotiate with all of humanity simultaneously, humans set up a social media poll and called it good enough. But perhaps the most significant development was happening on Earth itself. The revelation that humanity had somehow stopped a galactic war had united the planet in a way nothing else could have. Old enemies set aside their differences. Resources that had been hoarded were suddenly shared. If humanity was going to pretend to be a galactic superpower, they'd better start acting like one. The New Geneva Convention, as historians would later call it, was signed by every nation on Earth. It established unified policies for dealing with alien species, created a global defense network, and, most importantly, funded scientific research at levels that would have been unimaginable just a year earlier. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, leading the team, trying to actually make the Persistence's fake technology real, found himself with unlimited resources and a mandate to make the impossible possible. His team included the best minds from every nation, working together with an urgency born of necessity. The quantum field manipulation is theoretically sound, he explained to his team during one late-night session. We just need to figure out how to scale it beyond the microscopic level. The energy requirements alone. Dr. Sarah Mueller, a German physicist, shook her head. We need to harness the output of a star. Or suggested Dr. Raj Patel, grinning, we fake it better. We can't actually duplicate matter on a macro scale, but what if we could create a field that makes sensors think we have? A kind of quantum shell game. That's not science, Mueller protested. That's just elaborate deception. So was the original persistence trick, Tanaka reminded her. And it worked well enough to stop a war. Sometimes, perception is more important than reality. Meanwhile, in the darker corners of the galaxy, not everyone was happy with the new status quo. The Shadow Brokers, a loose alliance of species that profited from conflict, watched their war profits evaporate as peace spread through the former war zone. In a meeting station hidden in a rogue asteroid, representatives of various criminal organizations gathered. The humans must be eliminated, hissed Sesek, a reptilian arms dealer whose scales had dulled with age and bitterness. They've disrupted 300 years of profitable conflict. Agreed, buzzed a hive mind fragment that specialized in mercenary operations. But how? They have the persistence. One ship, a cybernetic smuggler pointed out. However impossible it might be, it's still just one ship. It can't be everywhere at once. Can it? Sesek's tongue flicked nervously. It appeared to be in 12 places simultaneously. A trick. It has to be a trick. Nothing can violate physics that way. The smuggler's optical implants whirred as they focused. We need to test them. Force them to reveal their limitations. Plans were made in the shadows, but the Shadow Brokers had made a crucial error. They assumed humans thought like other species, that they would respond to threats in predictable ways. They were about to learn why assuming anything about humans was dangerous. The first test came 3 weeks later. A distress signal from a human cargo vessel under attack by pirates in the outer rim of the Unity sector. The Persistence was 5 days away at maximum speed. Any other species would have had to let the vessel fall or reveal the limitations of their technology. Captain Shun received the distress call on the bridge. Her crew looked to her expectantly, waiting for orders that would either save the cargo vessel or maintain their bluff. Lieutenant Morrison, Chun said calmly, open a channel to the cargo vessel. Channel open, Captain. Cargo vessel Hopeful Dawn. This is Captain Shun of the Persistence. Hold your position. Help is on the way. She closed the channel and turned to her navigation officer. Set course for the vessel. Maximum sustainable speed. But Captain, Reeves whispered, we can't possibly reach them in time. Chun smiled. No, we can't. But they can reach themselves. She opened another channel, this one encrypted with quantum keys that humanity had developed in secret. Task Force Shadow, this is Persistence. Operation Sleight of Hand is go. You have 4 hours to get into position. Across the Unity sector, 12 ships that looked nothing like the Persistence began to move. They were standard human vessels, a mix of retrofitted cargo haulers, mining vessels, and the few actual warships Earth had managed to build. But each one carried a special package, a quantum field generator that could, for a few minutes, make their energy signature match the Persistence. The pirates attacking the Hopeful Dawn were confident. They had the human vessel outgunned 3-1, and the Persistence was too far away to intervene. What they didn't expect was for space to suddenly ripple around them as a ship appeared from nowhere. It looked like the Persistence. It had the same energy signature as the Persistence. As far as their sensors could tell, it was the Persistence. Impossible, the pirate captain shrieked. You were tracked 5 days away. Were we? Captain Miguel Rodriguez of the UES Defiance, formerly a mining vessel, did his best Chin impression. Or were we exactly where we needed to be? The pirates, faced with what they believed was an impossible ship, did what the Krellian and Vorthack fleets had done. They ran. The incident should have exposed humanity's deception. After all, careful analysis would have shown that the Persistence that saved the cargo vessel had slightly different hull configurations, different engine emissions, different details that marked it as a different ship. But nobody did that analysis, because by the time anyone thought to look closer, reports were coming in from across the sector. The Persistence had been spotted simultaneously in 17 different locations, each time arriving just in time to prevent violence. Sometimes it was protecting traders. Sometimes it was mediating disputes. Once, memorably, it appeared to break up a bar fight between two species who had drunk too much of the wrong kind of alcohol. The galaxy's analysts went into overdrive. How could one ship be everywhere? The theories grew wilder with each sighting. The humans had mastered time travel. They had access to alternate dimensions. They had built a fleet of identical ships. They had made a deal with gods that existed outside normal space-time. The truth that humanity had simply equipped a bunch of regular ships with good sensors spoofing and coordinated their responses was somehow never considered. It was too simple, too mundane. Surely a species that had stopped the greatest war in galactic history had to have something more sophisticated than good timing and theater. Dr. Wright, the human diplomat who had mediated the peace talks, found himself in increasingly absurd conversations. Ambassador Wright, the Altarian representative, said during one council session, "We must know, does humanity possess temporal manipulation technology?" "I can neither confirm nor deny any technological capabilities," Wright replied, having perfected the art of saying nothing while sounding meaningful. But the sightings... The Persistence has been documented in multiple locations separated by distances that would require faster-than-light travel beyond anything known. Wright nodded sagely. The universe is full of mysteries. What seems impossible today becomes commonplace tomorrow. After all, every species in this room achieved something their ancestors would have called impossible. It was meaningless philosophy, but delivered with such conviction that the aliens took it as profound wisdom. Humans, they concluded, had transcended normal limitations through sheer force of will and insanity. The shadow brokers, watching their test fail spectacularly, regrouped. If one attack wouldn't expose human limitations, perhaps a coordinated assault would. They began planning something bigger, not realizing that human intelligence had infiltrated their networks months ago. Humanity's real secret weapon wasn't technology. It was paranoia refined by thousands of years of warfare among themselves. While other species had achieved unity within their own kinds millennia ago, humans still remembered how to spy, how to deceive, how to expect betrayal. They brought those skills to the galactic stage and found that nobody else was prepared for them. Lieutenant Commander Jane Foster, Earth's intelligence liaison on Unity Station, read the intercepted shadow broker communications with amusement. They're planning simultaneous attacks on 7 locations. They think if they stretch us thin enough, we'll have to reveal our limitations. Admiral Martinez, appearing via secure hologram, considered this. How many Persistence decoys do we have operational? 43, with another dozen coming online next month. We could appear at all 7 locations and still have reserves. Do it, but make some of them arrive late. Let a few situations get desperate before the Persistence saves the day. We need to maintain the illusion that we have limitations, just not the ones they expect. The coordinated attack came 2 weeks later. 7 different locations across the Unity sector came under assault simultaneously. Mining operations, trading posts, even a hospital ship carrying wounded from the old war. The shadow brokers watched eagerly, waiting to see the Persistence fail to be everywhere at once. Instead, they saw something that broke their understanding of reality. The Persistence appeared at all 7 locations, but not simultaneously. It arrived at each one at the exact moment of maximum drama, just as shields were about to fail, just as boarding parties were about to breach, just as hope seemed lost. And each time, the impossible ship didn't just drive off the attackers. It seemed to know exactly what to do, exactly where to strike, exactly how to minimize casualties while maximizing psychological impact. It was as if the humans could see the future. They couldn't, of course, but They could see the shadow brokers' communications, predict their tactics, and coordinate their responses with the precision of a species that had turned warfare into an art form over thousands of years of practice on themselves. The aftermath of the failed coordinated attack broke the shadow brokers. Some went into hiding. Others tried to switch sides, offering information to anyone who would protect them from human retaliation. A few, the smartest ones, simply retired, deciding that any species that could be everywhere at once wasn't worth antagonizing. But the real victory wasn't military. It was psychological. The galaxy had now seen the Persistence perform feats that shouldn't just be impossible. They should be impossible squared. The myth grew with each telling. The humans hadn't just mastered new technology. They had transcended the normal rules of reality itself. In council chambers across the galaxy, a new phrase entered the lexicon: human impossible. It meant something that couldn't be done, shouldn't be done, but somehow had been done anyway. And increasingly, species began to realize that when humans were involved, the impossible became merely improbable, and the improbable became inevitable. Captain Shun, reading reports of the latest incidents, shook her head in amazement. "We've created a monster," she told Reeves. "A myth that's taken on a life of its own. Is that a bad thing?" Reeves asked. Shun considered this, thinking about the peace that had held for 6 months, the trade that was flourishing, the species that were learning to work together instead of fight. "No," she decided. "But we'd better figure out how to make some of our fiction into fact. Eventually, someone's going to call a bluff we can't cover. You think they'll figure out the truth? Eventually. But by then, hopefully, we'll have learned enough from the rest of the galaxy to have some real advantages. We're buying time with theater, but we're spending that time wisely." She was right. Across Earth, in labs and workshops and think tanks, humans were absorbing galactic knowledge at an unprecedented rate. What had started as an elaborate bluff was slowly becoming something more. Not the impossible technology everyone believed in, but something potentially more dangerous. A species that combined the best of galactic knowledge with uniquely human creativity. The ethereals had been wrong. Humans hadn't discovered new physics. They had discovered something more powerful, the ability to make others believe they had. And in a galaxy where perception shaped reality more than anyone realized, that belief was becoming its own form of power. As the Unity sector continued to thrive under the protection of an impossible ship that was everywhere and nowhere, the galaxy slowly adjusted to a new reality. The humans were here to stay. They played by different rules. And nobody, absolutely nobody, wanted to find out what else they might be capable of if pushed. The Warzone that had burned for 300 years was now a beacon of peace, protected by nothing more than human audacity and the galaxy's willingness to believe in the impossible. And every day that peace held, humanity grew stronger, smarter, and more integrated into a galactic community that watched them with a mixture of awe, fear, and desperate curiosity. The bluff had become reality. The impossible had become inevitable. And humanity had discovered that sometimes the greatest strength wasn't in what you could do, but in what others believed you could do. It was a lesson they would carry with them as they stepped fully onto the galactic stage, ready to face whatever challenges came next with a one weapon no other species could match. The absolute conviction that impossible was just another word for challenge accepted. 1 year after the Persistence incident, the galaxy had adapted to what scholars were calling the human paradigm. Trade routes through the Unity sector had increased by 400%. Former enemies were working together on joint ventures. The peace that everyone had thought impossible was not just holding, it was thriving. But success, as humanity knew from bitter experience, often breeds its own challenges. The Great Audit, as it came to be known, started innocuously enough. The Galactic Science Council, driven by the ethereals and supported by dozens of species obsessed with understanding human technology, announced a comprehensive study of the persistence phenomenon. They had collected thousands of sensor readings, hundreds of eyewitness accounts, and enough data to fill a small moon's worth of storage crystals. Captain Shin received the news while overseeing repairs on the actual persistence. The ship had been running constantly for a year, and even impossible technology needed maintenance. Or at least, it needed to look like it did. "They're going to figure out," Commander Reeves said quietly, reviewing the Science Council's announcement. "No way our spoofing holds up under that level of scrutiny." She nodded, but she was smiling. "You're right. Which is why we're not going to let them scrutinize what they think they're scrutinizing. Captain, give me a secure channel to Earth. It's time for Phase 2. Phase 2, as Admiral Martinez explained to the hastily assembled Earth Defense Council, was something humans called doubling down. When a bluff was about to be called, you didn't fold. You raised the stakes so high that no one dared to call. "Ladies and gentlemen," Martinez addressed the council, "we've had a year to prepare. A year to study galactic technology. A year to turn some of our fiction into fact. Dr. Tanaka, what do we have?" Dr. Tanaka stood, exhaustion evident in his features but triumph in his eyes. "We can't replicate the quantum superposition on a macro scale. That's still beyond us. But we've developed something else. We call it the Heisenberg field." He activated a hologram showing a complex web of equations. "By manipulating quantum uncertainty at the boundary level, we can make sensors literally unable to determine our exact state. It doesn't make us be in multiple places at once, but it makes it impossible to prove we're not." "English doctor," someone called out. "We can make reality fuzzy. Not change it, just blur it a little. Enough that no sensor, no matter how advanced, can definitively say what it's seeing. And the power source, still using contained microsingularities, but we've figured out how to channel the Hawking radiation more efficiently. We can't match the power output we've been claiming, but we can make it look like we can for about 30 minutes at a time." Martinez turned to another figure. "Dr. Park, what's your psychological assessment?" The xenopsychologist stood, consulting her notes. "The galaxy isn't just afraid of our technology. They're afraid of our unpredictability. Every species has spent millennia developing along predictable paths. They know each other's capabilities, limitations, thought patterns. Humans are an unknown variable in their equations. That uncertainty is our greatest asset. So we lean into it," Martinez concluded. "When they audit us, we give them something to find. Something that raises more questions than it answers." The great audit began 3 months later. Ships from 97 different species converged on the Unity sector, each equipped with the most advanced sensors their civilizations could produce. The Ethereals brought detection equipment that could measure quantum states at the subatomic level. The Vorthak deployed probability analyzers that could predict outcomes across multiple dimensions. The Krellians grew specialized biosensors that could detect organic traces across light years. And humanity welcomed them all with open arms. "Distinguished colleagues," Dr. Wright addressed the assembled scientists at the audit's opening ceremony. "We're honored by your interest in our humble contributions to galactic peace. In the spirit of scientific cooperation, we're prepared to demonstrate the Persistence's capabilities under controlled conditions." The first demonstration was scheduled for the following day. Every scanner, every sensor, every detection device in the galaxy was focused on a single point in space where the Persistence would appear. Captain Chin sat in her ready room, reviewing the plan one final time. Everything depended on timing, on misdirection, on making the impossible seem even more impossible. "Captain," her science officer reported, "all 47 decoy ships are in position. The Heisenberg field generators are online. We're ready. Then, let's give them a show they'll never forget." The demonstration began simply enough. The Persistence appeared at the designated coordinates, its impossible energy signature blazing across every sensor. The watching scientists immediately began their scans, their instruments probing every aspect of the ship. And that's when things got interesting. The more precisely they tried to measure the Persistence's position, the more uncertain its velocity became. The more accurately they tried to determine its mass, the more its energy signature fluctuated. Every measurement created more uncertainty, more impossibility. "Fascinating," breathed the lead ethereal scientist, their energy form pulsing with excitement. "It's as if the ship exists in a state of perpetual quantum uncertainty scaled up to the macroscopic level." But that was just the beginning. As the scientists watched, the persistence began to fade. Not disappear, not cloak, but become less certain. Its edges grew fuzzy. Its energy signature spread out like a probability wave. And then, in defiance of everything the watching species knew about physics, it was in two places at once. Not appear to be, was. Both versions were equally real, equally solid, equally impossible. They had slightly different energy signatures, slightly different positions, but both were unquestionably the persistence. Ow! The Vorthack Supreme calculator demanded, their mathematical mind reeling. The energy requirements alone. That's when the third persistence appeared. Then, the fourth. By the time the count reached 12, half the watching scientists had given up trying to take readings. Their instruments weren't just showing impossible results. They were showing contradictory, impossible results. The lead Altarian scientist, their crystalline form resonating with frustration, announced, "Our sensors are detecting tachyon emissions, but they're moving backwards through time. The ship appears to be creating its own temporal causality loop." Confirmed, added a Quellian physicist. But I'm also reading dimensional phase shifts that suggest the ship is partially existing in 17 different realities simultaneously. None of it was true, of course. The Heisenberg field was creating sensor ghosts, false readings that were consistent with impossible physics. The genius of humanity's scientists hadn't been in creating impossible technology. It had been in figuring out how to make sensors think they were detecting impossible technology. After 30 minutes, the demonstration ended. The multiple versions of the persistence collapsed back into one, which performed a casual loop around the observation fleet before jumping to hyperspace with an energy signature that suggested it had somehow gained power from the demonstration rather than expended it. The aftermath was chaos. Scientists from different species compared readings and found that no two sets of sensors had recorded exactly the same thing. The ethereals detected pure energy manipulation. The Vorthack measured dimensional mathematics that shouldn't exist. The Krellians' biosensors had somehow detected that the ship was alive, dead, and in a state of quantum life-death superposition all at once. The only consistent finding, the lead scientist announced at the confusion-filled debrief, is that human technology operates on principles we don't understand. Principles that may not be understandable within our current framework of physics. But the real masterstroke came later in informal discussions that always followed formal scientific gatherings. Human scientists, freed from the need to maintain official positions, became surprisingly talkative over drinks. You want to know the real secret? Dr. Mueller confided to a group of increasingly intoxicated alien physicists. We don't fully understand it either. We were experimenting with quantum fields when something unexpected happened. The persistence isn't built on principles we discovered. It's built on principles that discovered us. What does that mean? A zealothy scientist asked, their bioluminescent skin flickering with confusion and alcohol effects. Mueller leaned in conspiratorially. Think about it. Every species assumes technology is something you create, control, master. But what if sometimes technology creates itself? What if consciousness and quantum mechanics interact in ways that bypass normal causality? What if believing something impossible makes it possible? It was complete nonsense wrapped in just enough legitimate scientific terminology to sound plausible. But to species that had just watched sensors fail in ways that shouldn't be possible, it planted a seed of doubt. Maybe human technology wasn't just advanced. Maybe it was fundamentally different. The Great Audit concluded with a 10,000-page report that essentially said, "We have no idea how humans do what they do, but they definitely do it." The scientific community was split between those who believe humans had transcended known physics and those who believed the entire thing was an elaborate hoax. The fact that both groups had evidence supporting their positions only added to the confusion. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the galaxy, forces that had remained neutral in the great conflicts began to stir. The Ancient Ones, species so old they remembered when the galaxy was young, had watched the human emergence with interest. Now they decided it was time to test these newcomers properly. The first contact came through dreams. Every human in space, from Captain Chun to the newest recruit, experienced the same vision on the same night. A vast intelligence, older than stars, speaking in concepts rather than words. You are interesting, the presence conveyed. You have made the galaxy believe in your impossibility. But belief and reality are different things. We offer a choice. Reveal your truth and accept your place as another young species finding its way, or maintain your deception and face a test that will require the impossible to truly become possible. Chun woke with a gasp, finding every human on her ship had experienced the same thing. Within hours, reports came in from across human space. The Ancient Ones had made contact. Earth's response was uniquely human. So, President Martinez, recently elected after her military success, addressed the Emergency Council. Alien gods want to call our bluff. Options. We could come clean, suggested the Secretary of State. Admit the deception, take our lumps, try to maintain what influence we've gained through conventional means. We could ignore them, offer the defense minister. Pretend the dreams didn't happen. Or Dr. Tanaka said slowly. We could do what humans have always done when faced with impossible challenges. We could make the impossible possible. You mean actually develop the technology we've been pretending to have? Martinez asked. Not exactly. The Ancient Ones said belief and reality are different things. But what if they're not? What if belief, sufficiently widespread and strongly held, can influence reality at the quantum level? What if the observer effect works on a galactic scale? It was insane. It was impossible. It was perfectly human. Operation Faith, as it was codenamed, was humanity's most ambitious project yet. Not to build impossible technology, but to make the galaxy's belief in that technology so strong that reality itself would bend to accommodate it. Human media teams worked overtime, creating documentaries about the persistence that mixed fact and fiction seamlessly. Human traders spread stories in every port about miraculous saves by the impossible ship. Human diplomats spoke in carefully crafted phrases that implied vast knowledge without revealing anything. And throughout it all, the persistence and its decoys continued their work. Each appearance was carefully orchestrated to reinforce the myth. When pirates attacked a hospital ship, the persistence arrived at the exact moment to create maximum drama. When a natural disaster threatened a colony, the persistence somehow used its quantum fields to stabilize the tectonic plates. When two species came to the brink of war, the persistence appeared simultaneously in both their capitals, forcing peace through sheer impossibility. The galaxy watched, measured, analyzed, and slowly, inevitably began to truly believe. Not just accept, not just fear, but believe at a fundamental level that humans had achieved something beyond the merely technological. 6 months after the Ancient Ones' ultimatum, they returned. This time, they manifested physically, beings of light and thought-given form, appearing simultaneously in every major population center in the galaxy. Humans, they announced, their words bypassing sound to appear directly in every mind. You have passed the first test. You have made the galaxy believe in your impossibility so thoroughly that reality itself has begun to accommodate that belief. The quantum fields you manipulate with your minds, the probability waves you ride with your will. These are becoming real because enough consciousness believes them to be real. But now comes the true test. Belief can create reality, but only action can sustain it. You must use your impossible ship to do something genuinely impossible. Not a trick, not a deception, but a true transcendence of what is possible. You have 7 days. They vanished, leaving a galaxy in uproar and humanity facing its greatest challenge yet. How do you do the impossible when the impossible is what everyone already thinks you're doing? The answer came from the most unlikely source. A child on Earth, watching the news with the pure clarity that only children possess, asked a simple question. If everyone believes we can do impossible things, and believing makes it real, why don't we just believe harder? It was naive. It was simplistic. It was brilliant. Humanity launched the most coordinated psychological operation in history. Not directed at others, but at themselves. Every human Everywhere was asked to believe, to truly, fundamentally believe that the persistence could save everyone, everywhere, all at once. To hold that impossibility in their minds and hearts and refuse to let go. Meditation centers opened on every human vessel. Prayer groups formed among the secular. Scientists ran experiments in collective consciousness. Artists created works designed to strengthen belief. Musicians composed symphonies of impossibility. Writers crafted stories where the boundary between fiction and reality dissolved. And at the center of it all, Captain Shun and her crew prepared for something they couldn't prepare for, to do the impossible without knowing what the impossible would be. The seventh day arrived with a crisis that seemed designed by fate. A stellar anomaly in the galactic core went critical, threatening to send a wave of destruction across half the galaxy. The energy wave would arrive at different systems at different times, but the devastation would be total. Hundreds of species would need to evacuate simultaneously, but there weren't enough ships, enough time, enough hope. Unless you had an impossible ship that could be everywhere at once. Chun stood on her bridge, feeling the weight of not just humanity's future, but the galaxy's survival on her shoulders. Around her, her crew waited, ready to attempt the impossible with nothing but human stubbornness and the galaxy's belief. All stations, she announced, her voice carrying across human space. This is it. Every decoy, every ship, every human who can hear me. We're going to save them all. Not because we can, but because we must. Not because it's possible, but because we've made the impossible our specialty. How, Captain? Reeves asked quietly. Chun smiled, the expression carrying all of humanity's audacious hope. I have absolutely no idea. But that's never stopped us before. All ships synchronize quantum fields. Let's show the galaxy what human impossible really means. 47 ships activated their Heisenberg field generators simultaneously. But this time, something different happened. The collective belief of billions of humans, the faith of 1,000 species, the sheer weight of necessity, and will crash together at the quantum level. Reality hiccuped. The persistence didn't split into 12 copies. It didn't appear in multiple places. It became a quantum wave function that existed everywhere it was needed simultaneously. Not copies, not illusions, but a single ship experiencing every location at once through sheer impossibility made manifest. Across the galaxy, evacuation fleets found themselves guided by a ship that was there and not there, real and unreal, impossible and inevitable. The persistence created stable wormholes where none should exist. It generated shields that protected entire planets. It bent space and time around itself like a lens, redirecting the stellar wave's energy into harmless dimensions that might not have existed until that moment. For one impossible hour, the UES persistence was everywhere, saving everyone, defying every law of physics through the simple expedient of having enough people believe it could. When it ended, when the crisis passed, and the ship collapsed back into a single, exhausted reality at Unity Station, the galaxy was forever changed. Not just saved, but fundamentally altered in its understanding of what was possible. The Ancient Ones appeared one final time, their forms somehow conveying approval. You have learned the greatest secret, they said. Reality is not fixed. It is a consensus constantly renegotiated by conscious beings. You humans have not just discovered new technology. You have discovered that technology itself is just a way of convincing reality to behave differently. Welcome to the true galactic community. As they faded, leaving humanity to contemplate what they had become, Captain Shin slumped in her chair. They had done the impossible. They had saved the galaxy. They had transcended the boundary between belief and reality. So, Reeves asked weakly, what do we do now? Chun laughed, the sound carrying exhaustion and exhilaration in equal measure. Now we figure out what we actually did and how to do it again. Because I have a feeling the galaxy is going to expect us to keep being impossible. She was right. Humanity had started with a bluff, continued with smoke and mirrors, and ended by making the impossible possible through sheer force of will. They had become what they pretended to be, a species that looked at the laws of physics not as limitations, but as suggestions. And in universities across the galaxy, a new field of study emerged: human impossibility theory, the science of making reality optional through sufficient application of belief, stubbornness, and what scholars could only describe as weaponized audacity. The Warzone remained at peace. The galaxy remained in awe, and humanity remained impossible, not because they had transcendent technology, but because they had convinced the universe itself that they did, which, when you thought about it, might be even more impossible than the impossible technology would have been. 5 years after the Persistence first entered the Warzone, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The Unity sector wasn't just peaceful. It had become the de facto capital of galactic civilization. Species that had never interacted were now partners. Technologies that had been hoarded were being shared. And at the center of it all, humanity continued to do the impossible with such regularity that human normal had become a phrase meaning impossible by any reasonable standard. Captain Sarah Chun, now Admiral Chun, stood in the observation deck of Unity Prime, the massive station that had grown from the original peace negotiation site. Her hair, once black with streaks of gray, was now more silver than dark. 5 years of bending reality through sheer will had aged her, but her eyes still held that spark of amused impossibility that had carried humanity so far. The Ethereals won another joint research project. Her aide, formerly Commander Reeves, now captain in his own right, reported. They're convinced we're hiding the mathematical proofs for our reality manipulation. Tell them the truth, Chun said, sipping her coffee. We don't have mathematical proofs. Math is for people who accept that reality has rules. It was a joke, but, like many human jokes, it contained more truth than fiction. The galaxy scientists had spent years trying to understand human technology, only to slowly realize that technology might be the wrong word. Humans had somehow weaponized belief itself, turning confidence into a force that could reshape reality. The breakthrough in understanding had come from an unexpected source. The hive mind collective, beings who shared consciousness across millions of bodies, had observed something unique about humans. They were the only species that could hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously without experiencing psychological breakdown. You believe your ship is impossible, the collective had explained during one memorable conference. Yet you also believe it works. You know you are deceiving others, yet you also believe your deception is truth. This cognitive dissonance doesn't destroy you, it empowers you. You exist in a quantum state of belief and disbelief simultaneously. Dr. Lisa Park, now head of the Galactic Institute for Xenopsychology, had published papers on what she called Schrodinger's faith, the human ability to believe something was both true and false until the universe was forced to pick one. And, increasingly, the universe picked whatever option humans need.